This is the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, episode 701, Education Renaissance, Research on Returning to School After Natural Disasters. Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat teacher, Vicki Davis. Vicki's guest today is Dr. Brianna Kurtz, a classroom teacher and researcher who specializes in global practices in returning to formal schooling after interruptions in education due to natural disasters. You are about to hear some fascinating ideas that she has learned from students who were displaced after disasters such as Hurricane Maria. You're going to find out what helped them resume school successfully and how to foster a sense of belonging and community in your students during this education renaissance. Well, let's join Vicki and Brianna now. Enjoy the podcast.
This week on my blog, I shared the benefits of using chalk and Planboard and how my school uses them to plan our curriculum and our lessons. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn how you can start planning in Planboard for free. Today, we're talking with Dr. Brianna Kurtz. Now, when you hear about her research, you are just going to go, I've got to hear this. Brianna, your research is global practices in returning to formal schooling after interruptions in education due to natural disasters. Oh my goodness, do we have the natural disasters? We've got a pandemic, we've got fires, we've got hurricanes and flooding. So what does the research tell us about our kids going back to school no matter what they've experienced?
Well, thank you for having me on here, Vicki. And we definitely have a lot going on right now. My research had focused primarily originally with a goal of when I was teaching in Florida about looking at students that had been displaced to Florida schools after having the effects of Hurricane Maria, which hit Puerto Rico, and looking how to integrate those students into the Florida classrooms, whether it be in a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. And what I ended up finding with the research was just an interesting international response from so many different nations that have faced this and have really used natural disasters and interruptions in schooling as a way to incite almost a renaissance in their educational systems and try things that hadn't been tried before. I'll give you an example. Looking at the island nation of Vanuatu, after they had a complete devastation due to a cyclone, they actually went in their educational system and incorporated multilingual education for the first time because they were looking for something new and a way to revamp and revisit and to bring back. When we're looking at responses in Liberia and Sierra Leone through Ebola, we saw students that were coming back after really not leaving the classroom in the traditional sense, sure, but in a non-traditional sense, they were putting lessons over national public radio for students to follow along and keep up with reading. Every nation does something a little bit different, but what is the main thread when looking at the response and the return to schooling is making sure those students have a sense of belonging and that they still feel that they are a part of a community. Every student's experience in a natural disaster is going to be different. But the commonality is that they've all been through it together. So now what we can do is come up with ways as educators to make our classroom environment inviting, but also consider the renaissance that's happening. This is a chance for us as educators to make those kinds of decisions about whether we really want to digitize what we've been doing, which has worked with partial successes for sure. But as you talk to educators too, what we keep hearing is we want to do something different. Well, what a time to be able to try something different and to try to make us a little less exhausted too.
Try something different. And I love looking at the positive side and saying, let's have an educational renaissance. But let's back up to one super important thing that you have. You've got some educators who are teaching online, some are teaching face-to-face. Now, which way are you teaching right now?
Right now, I am fully online synchronous. So my days are spent on Zoom.
Yep, and mine have been face-to-face mostly, but a little bit of Zoom also. Now, how do you build community in Zoom so that students feel like they belong?
You know, it was interesting that you asked this, Vicki, because at the start, I was feeling exhausted, as are so many of us educators right now, trying to think about, well, how can I get everything that I've done and all the good stuff, the lessons that I love the most, how can I make them work in this environment? And the reality is they can't all work in this environment. I've got to think about something different. I have a box in my basement that says Barbies and slingshots that's going to stay there for a while. My statistics educator folks will definitely know what that's all about. But what I started doing was thinking about the problems that we've had, especially in mathematics education, which is my area of teaching. And we always are talking about how students are not making connections to what they've done in the past and carrying them through with their education. So I got a little inspired with some of my students because in talking to them and trying to get them to come off mute or wondering why they were trying to mute their background, so many of them had younger brothers and sisters in the background that they were also doing their online learning. And then I started having students staying after class and saying, hey, my brother's in sixth grade, seventh grade, and they're doing something I forgot. Can you help me with them really quick? So what I did was I took that and I turned it into a classroom culture where the students could interact with each other and each other's families. Instead of trying to isolate, why not embrace the fact that everybody is home in a different situation and everyone's trying to do online learning together? So every one of my classes right now has a family help corner where students can pose questions from their cousins, siblings, loved ones, parents who are in college, and other students can respond to that on video, and they get a little extra bonus if they make a connection to something we're doing right now. That's something we couldn't have done before the pandemic, nor would have thought of doing before the pandemic. So instead of looking at how can I make my classroom look like it used to, I wanted to start thinking about how can I make my classroom look like it never could before?
How can I make my classroom look like it never could before? Do you have any other ways? Because here's the thing is, you and I have been talking, you talked about Hurricane Maria, you've talked about islands, you talked about Liberia, Sierra Leone, and now you're relating it to what we're experiencing. And that's really what they did. They said, what can we do that we've never done before? Are there any other things besides the Family Help Corner? Because that's awesome.
Yes, there's a lot that I've been trying to do. One thing I found was that students are having a device, and I can rely on every single one of them to have that device. So I'm having students create collaborative video lessons for each other because every one of them has access to that technology and to the platforms that we have. And then they're able to post the video lessons to each other and also connect. They're learning what they can actually do in a room together and how they can all talk and how they can present, how they can actually write on each other's whiteboards while being apart. So trying to come up with ways where they're still connecting and doing things that we couldn't do before. And before, when you could not rely on students to all have a device or have students to all have a certain level of access, those things were limited. But now we have at least a bit of an even playing field with technology. So instead of trying to spend my time digitizing worksheets, why not use technology as a teaching tool in a new way?
I love that. And, though the challenge is a lot of students have technology they've never had before. And that's the good thing. And it's also the challenge because they don't know how to behave on it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think with that too, you have to keep your humor as a teacher, but also reminding students just of the little things and the little moments. But also, we are in students' lives in a way that we have never been before. So because of that, we are literally having a window into their homes, which, like you said, is both a blessing and a curse at times. So learning how to behave in a classroom or to behave on technology is something new that we are all learning. So I wouldn't even say that that's just a problem for telling students how to behave. I think we are all learning as a class how to interact with each other in a way that is respectful, but also is compassionate to the fact that you don't know what's going on outside of that student's box. How many other people are in the household at that moment, all trying to do their learning? How many people are on the Wi-Fi because that student has the strong Wi-Fi, or did they have to go to another home or a parking lot? Compassion is definitely key. But as long as the students are responding and interacting with each other, I think a little bit of grace goes a long way.
So, Brianna, I'm so curious. I can't help it. I can't end the show without asking you this. So you've shared some of the research about that they have a sense of belonging and that we need to consider what's the renaissance we can have in education because of this. That do you have anything else from the research you've done that you're like, oh my goodness, we need to apply this now?
One thing that I did with my students who had come in from Hurricane Maria from Puerto Rico was pair them with one-on-one student mentors who spoke the same language, because that was one of the barriers they faced. And I had a lot of success with it. A way that we can translate this to the environment we have now is many people are dealing with situations where they have students who are in person sometimes and students who are online who are all members of the same class. That is a situation that many schools and many teachers are facing right now. It seems like you're teaching two classes at once. So why not set up a mentoring pairing system so a student from an in-person class can be paired with an online student and they can share those experiences and realize that we are still one big class. That idea of mentorship can go a long way, and it can help us in these platforms where often as teachers right now being put in some interesting dual environments.
So, Brianna, I totally 100% agree that a best practice for the high flex or hybrid system is what we call a class captain. That's what we call it at our school. When we had some high flex situations occur, we actually found that having at least two kids in the class, usually they're stronger students. They watch the back channel. They pose questions. They advocate for those students that are at home. Sometimes they answer questions. And then if you automatically save that chat, the teacher can take a look at it when class is over. And I don't know how teachers can make it if they don't have a paraprofessional in that back channel. They're going to have students in there and working together and creating that community of trust, and we're all in this together. That is such an excellent best practice. Do you have anything else that you want to pull out before we finish?
One thing, too, there's a lot of new research coming out from Conrad Hughes out in Switzerland, talking about the shift and the possibility of this educational renaissance, if you want to read more in that realm. There's a lot talking about more project-based learning, less about direct tests, because we all are struggling with how will we proctor a traditional test, and moving beyond the education system that we have known it for so long, and considering the possibility of having something different.
And just talking to kids.
Talking to kids.
And interact. Well, Dr. Brianna Kurtz, so many great ideas, resources, and did you ever have any idea when you were doing this original research that you would find such an application now?
I did not. I'll have to admit to you, Vicki, that when I was doing my research at first, I got a lot of different colleagues or other professors out there saying, well, this is really interesting, but very niche. And then that quickly changed. And then I became very glad that I had chosen this field so that hopefully we can all take something away from the research that's out there, because although this is our first time that we're looking at this in modern education in the United States, it certainly will not be the last.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. And educators, we've got some great best practices here. Just remember, help kids feel like they belong. They're part of a community. Consider what can we do that we couldn't do before, and have an excuse to do those things now, as well as adopting some of these best practices that are rapidly coming to the forefront for the situations we're in. Thanks, Brianna.
Thank you so much.
As we prepare to teach in a blended or distance learning environment, a rock-solid lesson planner is a must. I use a free program called Planboard for my lesson planning. My school uses Planboard with Chalk.com's curriculum planning tool. This powerful tool links with standards and gives us the ability to do some time-saving, efficient reporting and tracking. The best thing about Planboard is I can plan my lessons anywhere on my Mac, my PC, my iPad, or even my phone. Wherever I work, my lesson plans are with me. And as I said, Planboard is free for teachers. Check out Planboard now and sign up for free at coolcatteacher.com/Planboard. That's coolcatteacher.com/PLANBOARD. And join me and thousands of educators everywhere for this amazing lesson planning tool. Thanks.